Shalom, YouTube. May Yahweh protect us all. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us of our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Let us not fall into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For yours is the power and the kingdom and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. So this is going to be a somewhat continuation to what I was talking about with the Macedonians. Now, Alexander the Great was familiar with the prophecies in the book of Daniel. The Macedonian, not mainland Greek, but of, I believe, Cyprus. Chittim is Cyprus today, where apparently the Amalekites fled to. The Hittites had an empire there. So we're going to see what the Macedonians did to Israel in the days of the Maccabees. One thing to note is this has been deleted from the Protestant Bibles. It used to be in the King James Bible. The 1611 King James Bible has it, and then it was removed to make it cheaper, allegedly. All this proves that the Amalekites also distribute the Bibles. So, is the Bible corrupted? No. Is the Bible complete? No. Does the Bible teach us what we need? Yes. Are most people going to figure this out on their own? No. Are most people going to figure this out from church? Absolutely not. The church will not give you the answers. There's no church on this planet that's going to tell you, follow all of the law of Moses. We should be giving burnt sacrifices just as Jesus did. So we're going to see what these Macedonians did to Israel. The martyrdom of 7 brothers. It happened also that 7 brothers and their mother were arrested and were being compelled by the king, who is Antiochus Epiphanes. He inherited his empire after Alexander the Great died. Alexander the Great left his empire to four princes who came up with him from youth. This is prophesied in the book of Daniel. I believe in Daniel chapter 8 or so. So, Alexander the Great conquers Israel. He dies. He leaves the empire to 4 of his friends, and one of those friends is Antiochus, and after a few generations it arrives to Antiochus Epiphanes. Compelled by the king Antiochus Epiphanes under torture with whips and straps to partake of unlawful pig's flesh. One of them, acting as their spokesman, said, "What do you intend to ask and learn from us? For we are ready to die rather than transgress the laws of our ancestors." Same with Christ. I would rather die than disavow the holy cross. I would rather die than transgress the law of Moses. This is how we have to be. The law and the Gospels these are the 2 pieces of salvation that perfect us. We must keep the law of Moses, and we must honor the Gospels, exactly as Jesus instructed. So what does this mean? Jesus is the Messiah. He's the Son of God. He's coming back for his kingdom. Nothing they can do can stop this. And they can threaten us. They can murder us. It doesn't matter because we win in the end. The king fell into a rage. Oops. Okay, we'll go to this one first then. Alexander the Great, 1 Maccabees chapter 1. Remember, this is in the Catholic and the Orthodox Bible. It's only been removed from Protestant Bibles and only around the year 1611. There has been a conspiracy to hide the importance of the law of Moses from the Christians. After Alexander, the son of Philip, the Macedonian, who came from the land of Chittim, which is Cyprus, I believe, which is a land that the Hittites conquered. The Hittites are very close to the Amalekites. They're intermarried one to another. So the Amalekites, it could be said, moved to the land of Chittim. They conquered it in the 1400s before Christ, and this is where the Macedonian Alexander the Great comes from. So after he had defeated King Darius of the Persians and the Medes, he succeeded him as king. He had previously become king of Greece. See that? He became king of Greece. He's not from Greece. He conquered Greece and became their king. And he became king of Persia and Medo-Persia. He fought many battles, conquered strongholds, and slaughtered the kings of the earth. He advanced to the ends of the earth and plundered many nations. When the earth became quiet before him, he was exalted and his heart was lifted up. He gathered a very strong army and ruled over countries, nations, and princes, and they paid him tribute. After this he fell sick and perceived that he was dying. So he summoned his most honored officers who had been brought up with him from youth and divided his kingdom among them while he was still alive. And after Alexander had reigned 12 years, he died. Once again, this man was familiar with the prophecies in the book of Daniel. This prophecy about him dividing his kingdom to 4 princes, to 4 friends. This is in the book of Daniel. Then his officers began to rule, each in their own place. They all put on crowns after his death, and so did their descendants after them for many years, and they caused many evils on the earth. What kind of evils? Destroying archaeology, destroying libraries of ancient records. I mean, what the Greeks had done is unprecedented in the world of empire building. There had never been an empire that was so systematically destroying all the ancient wisdom like the Greeks. The Babylonians didn't do this. The Persians didn't do this. The Greeks did, and so did the Romans. This is the model for the New World Order, the Greco-Roman pagan model. And then came forth a sinful root, Antiochus Epiphanes, son of King Antiochus. He had been a hostage in Rome. He began to reign in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. In those days, so this is about 167 before Christ. In those days, certain renegades came out from Israel and misled many, saying, "Let us go and make a covenant with the nations around us, for since we separated from them, many disasters have come upon us. Let's transgress the law of Moses, because it sounds like fun." Now, these are Hellenistic Jews. These are heretics. These are enemies. And there are many of these in Israel. And they propagate abortion. They propagate witchcraft. They propagate homosexuality. They propagate Islamic equality with the Jews. There are many Jews in Israel who are enemies to the state of Israel because they do not follow the Torah and they actively fight against God. They fight against the Gospels and they fight against the Torah. Even if they pretend to follow the Torah, they don't. These are Talmudic heretics. These are the mixed multitude. These are Hellenized Jews. These are Greco-Roman pagans pretending to be Jews, and they're a threat to all humanity. Let us go and make a covenant with the nations around us, for since we separated from them, many disasters have come upon us. This proposal pleased them, and some of the people eagerly went to the king, who authorized them to observe the ordinances of the nations meaning Gentiles. So they built a gymnasium in Jerusalem according to the customs of the nations. So a Greek gymnasium where they wrestle naked, where they bathe in communal baths naked, where homosexuality runs rampant in the showers. That's what they built in Jerusalem. In the holy city of Jerusalem, they built a sodomite stronghold. And they made foreskins for themselves and abandoned the holy covenant. They joined themselves with the nations and sold themselves to do evil. When Antiochus saw that his kingdom was established, he determined to become king of the land of Egypt in order that he might reign over both kingdoms. So he invaded Egypt with a strong force and chariots and elephants and cavalry and with a large fleet. He engaged King Ptolemy of Egypt in battle, and Ptolemy turned and fled before him, and many were wounded and fell. They captured and fortified cities in the land of Egypt, and he plundered the land of Egypt. After subduing Egypt, Antiochus turned back in the 143rd year and went up against Israel and came to Jerusalem with a strong force. He arrogantly entered the sanctuary and took the golden altar, the lampstands for the light, and all its utensils. He also took the table for the bread of the presence, the cups for drink offerings, the bowls, the golden censers, the curtain, the crowns, and the gold decoration on the front of the temple. He stripped it all off. He took the silver and the gold and the costly vessels. He took also the hidden treasures that he found. Taking them all, he went into his own land. He shed much blood and spoke with great arrogance. Israel mourned deeply in every community. Rulers and elders groaned. Young women and young men became faint. The beauty of the women faded. Every bridegroom took up lament. She who sat in the bridal chamber was mourning. Even the land trembled for its inhabitants. And all the house of Jacob was clothed with shame. 2 years later, the king sent to the cities of Judah a chief collector of tribute, and he came to Jerusalem. With a large force. Deceitfully he spoke peaceable words to them, and they believed him. But he suddenly fell upon the city and dealt it a severe blow, and destroyed many people of Israel. He plundered the city, burned it with fire, and tore down its houses, and its surrounding walls. They took captive the women and children and seized the livestock. Then they fortified the city of David with a large, strong wall and strong towers, and it became their citadel. They stationed there a sinful nation, men who were renegades. Who is this sinful nation? I believe it's the Amalekites. I believe either the Amalekites or the Edomites or the Moabites or some race that's been hostile to Israel for centuries. At this point, it would be over a millennia. They had an ancestral hatred for Israel. They put there a sinful nation, men who were renegades. These strengthened their position. They stored up arms and food, and collecting the spoils of Jerusalem, they stored them there and became a great menace. For the citadel became an ambush The citadel became an ambush against the sanctuary, an evil adversary of Israel at all times. On every side of the sanctuary, they shed innocent blood. They even defiled the sanctuary. So they defiled the sanctuary with polluted, burnt sacrifices of pigs and stuff. So this is how they desecrated the temple. It had to be reconsecrated. And that's what Hanukkah is about. They rededicated the temple after it was desecrated by the Greeks. Because of them, the residents of Jerusalem... And remember this. Why were they so hostile to Judaism? The Greeks were not like this to the other pagan nations. Even the historians don't have a good explanation for why they were so hostile to Israel, to Judaism. They say, they think it was a misunderstanding. They think that the priests were going to revolt against Greece, and for this reason this happened. But that's just speculation. The truth is, Greece is hostile to Judaism because Judaism comes from God, just as the Romans were hostile to Christianity because Christianity comes from God. However, Judaism has the law and Christianity has the Gospels. But Christianity abandoned the law at some point, and Judaism has not properly accepted the Gospels, nor do they follow the Torah anymore. So, on every side, they shed innocent blood. They even defiled the sanctuary. Because of them, the residents of Jerusalem fled. She became a dwelling of strangers. She became strange to her offspring, and her children forsook her. Her sanctuary became desolate like a desert. Her feasts were turned to mourning, her Sabbaths into a reproach, her honor into contempt. Her dishonor now grew as great as her glory. Her exaltation was turned into mourning. So, the books of Maccabees, and there are several. There's even Ethiopian Maccabees, which is called Maccabean. I know there's at least 4 in the Orthodox Bible. I think there's 8 books of Maccabees. I mean, there's so many books about this. This is a very important time in history. What the Greeks did to the world, there are no words for how evil. And look at how Neil deGrasse Tyson looks up to the Greeks. Look at how everybody says, the Greeks are the founders of modern civilization. No, they are the usurpers. They are murderers and monsters. They are Amalekites who have hijacked humanity and never released their grip. But the Bible shows what happened. If you have an Orthodox or a Catholic or Ethiopian Bible, you can see for yourself. But there are many books about the events in the book of Maccabees. It's the most important part in the history of Israel aside from the Gospels. And the king wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, New World Order, and that all should give up their particular customs. All the nations accepted the command of the king. Many, even from Israel, gladly adopted his religion. They sacrificed to idols and profaned the Sabbath. And the king sent letters by messengers to Jerusalem and the towns of Judah. He directed them to follow customs strange to the land, to forbid burnt offerings and sacrifices and drink offerings in the sanctuary, to forbid us to give burnt sacrifices to God. Well, why are they forbidding something unless it's important? Why did Jesus give burnt sacrifices? Why did Jesus tell us to give burnt sacrifices? Why are we not giving burnt sacrifices? Because the Greeks have hijacked us. They have made us forget our connection with God. These burnt sacrifices, the law of Moses, and the Gospels, it's all one religion, and the Gospels perfects the Old Testament. If you keep the law of Moses and the Gospels, you are the perfected Christian. And Jesus said, I go to my Father, and what I have done you will do and greater, because I go back to my Father who sent me. So Jesus says that the miracles he performed while he was on earth, we're going to be able to do those and greater if we keep the commandments, because he's going back to his Father. When's the last time a Christian gave burnt sacrifices? The king sent letters by messengers to Jerusalem and the towns of Judah. He directed them to follow customs strange to the land, to forbid burnt offerings and sacrifices and drink offerings in the sanctuary, to profane Sabbaths and festivals. Isn't that what the Romans did? That they removed the Sabbath from Saturday and they moved it to Sunday? To defile the sanctuary and the holy ones, to build altars and sacred precincts and shrines for idols, to sacrifice pigs and other unclean animals, and to leave their sons uncircumcised. They were to make themselves abominable to everything unclean and profane, so that they would forget the law and change all the ordinances. Daniel chapter 9, I believe, talked about it. Daniel chapter 7, that he will change the law and the times and make us forget the law of Moses. He added, and whoever does not obey the command of the king shall die. All right, do it. You think I'm afraid? Oh no, I wanted to live long enough to see the AI technocracy overthrow my freedoms. Now I have to die because of the law of Moses. How horrible. Like, what future are they leaving for us? Does anybody, honestly, at this point, martyrs aren't going to care. Nobody's going to care to be a martyr looking at the way the world is going. In such words he wrote to his whole kingdom. He appointed inspectors over all the people and commanded the towns of Judah to offer sacrifice town by town. Many of the people, everyone who forsook the law, joined them, and they did evil in the land. They drove Israel into hiding in every place of refuge they had. So Israel is those who are faithful to the law. Now on the 15th day of Chislev, which is a month, I'm not sure which one, in the 145th year, they erected a desolating sacrilege on the altar of burnt offering. They also built altars in the surrounding towns of Judah and offered incense at the doors of the houses and in the streets. The books of the law that they found, they tore to pieces and burned with fire. Anyone found possessing the book of the covenant or anyone who had adhered to the law of Moses was condemned to death by decree of the king. So imagine that. They were burning every piece of Hebrew literature they could find, especially the law of Moses, and anybody who practiced it was put to death. So this is how a lot of these Old Testament books were lost. This is how they do it. This is how they do it. There are many more texts that should be in the Bible. The most important is always going to be the law. The Old Testament, the most important is the law. The New Testament, the most important is the Gospels. If you have the law of Moses and you have the Gospels and you don't have anything else in the Bible, but you live by the Torah and you live by the Gospels and you know that the rest of the Bible is important, but you don't know it because it's hidden from you, the Torah and the Gospels is enough to save your soul. They kept using violence against Israel, against those who were found month after month in the towns. On the 25th day of the month, they offered sacrifice on the altar that was on top of the altar of burnt offering. According to the decree, they put to death the women who had their children circumcised and their families and those who circumcised them, and they hung the infants from their mothers' necks. But many in Israel stood firm and were resolved in their heart not to eat unclean food. They chose to die rather than to be defiled by food or to profane the holy covenant, and they did die. Very great wrath came upon Israel. And this is what the Christians have to know. The Christians have to know that this was done to the Jews as well. Okay, Christianity and Judaism is the exact same religion. Judaism is the Torah, Christianity is the Gospels and the Torah, but we have forgotten the law of Moses, and this is a big problem. So this time period was the most chaotic time period in the Old Testament for Israel. And these Greeks, these Macedonian Greeks, these are the Amalekites. This is an ancestral war going back to Esau and Jacob about 2,000 years before Christ. So once again, there are several books of Maccabees, probably at least 10 if you count the Ethiopian ones. I think there's at least 6 books of Maccabees. One of these books I believe is missing because I think it was the second book of Maccabees. Here, give me a second. I actually have the book of Maccabees right here. Give me a second to look for it. I got one of these books of Apocrypha. It's called the Complete 54-Book Apocrypha 2022 edition. So, Complete 54-Book Apocrypha, highly recommend. It wasn't even that expensive. It was only like $25, I think. So let me look for the second book of Maccabees. It's going to take a while, I think. Maybe I already passed it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's at the beginning. Okay, give me a second. Wisdom of Solomon, First Maccabees, Second Maccabees. Okay. So it talks about the history of this book. So Second Maccabees chapter 1. The countrymen, the Jews that are in Jerusalem, and those who are in the country of Judea, send greetings to the countrymen, the Jews that are throughout Egypt, and wish them good peace. They wish them shalom. May God do good to you and remember his covenant with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. God always remembers the covenant. We are the ones who forget the covenant. So he talks about, in the reign of Demetrius in the 169th year, we the Jews have already written to you the suffering and the extremity that has come on us in these years, from the time that Jason and his company revolted from the Holy Land and the kingdom. And they set the gate on fire and shed innocent blood. And we implored Yahweh and were heard, and we offered sacrifice and meal offering, and we lighted the lamps, and we set out the bread of the presentation. And now see that you keep the days of the celebration of the shelters of the month of Kislev. So it talks about, I'm trying to remember which chapter it was. I thought it was this one. But essentially it talks about how that they compiled this book from a bunch of other accounts. It was like multiple books. Maybe it was the third book of Maccabees. I'm trying to remember which one it was. But they talk about how they took this book. This book is like a summary. It's like, if you're a historian and you want to read the history of it more closely. Okay, hold on, was this it? Okay, here it is. So, which have been declared by Jason of Cyrene. So this is chapter 2, verse 31. which have been declared by Jason of Cyrene in 5 scrolls, we will determine to abridge in one work. For having in view the confused mass of the numbers and the difficulty which awaits those who would enter into the narratives of the history, by reason of the abundance of the matter. So, this story, 2nd Maccabees, comes from 5 scrolls summarized into one. So this is a very, very, very important part of history, and the part of history that's been most suppressed. If the Christians knew that the Jews were being martyred as well for following the Torah, maybe the Christians would understand how important the Torah is. So, without further ado, let's continue with the 2nd book of Maccabees, chapter 7, the Martyrdom of the 7 brothers. Once again, the official historians, they don't understand how the Greeks were so hostile. They don't know why. It's, I don't know, maybe the priests were revolting, or they misunderstood and thought they were revolting. It's like they really have no explanation. They have absolutely no reason for being this hostile to the law of Moses, just as the Romans have no reason for being so hostile to Christianity. But if the world is run by Satan, and the law of Moses and the Gospels comes from God, then you can see why these Satanists would be so hostile towards it. Wherever there is persecution of Judaism and Christianity, you know that it's because of Satan. But if you follow the law of Moses perfectly, as Jesus followed it perfectly, at least make the attempt to, burnt sacrifices, Sabbaths, Passovers, every rule God gave we must keep. Keep the law of Moses, keep the Gospels, you're golden. It happened also that 7 brothers and their mother were arrested and were being compelled by the king under torture with whips and straps to partake in unlawful pig's flesh. One of them, acting as their spokesman, said, "What do you intend to ask and learn from us? For we are ready to die rather than transgress the laws of our ancestors." The king fell into a rage and gave orders to have pans and cauldrons heated. These were heated immediately, and he commanded that the tongue of their spokesman be cut out, and that they scalp him and cut off his hands and feet, while the rest of the brothers and the mother looked on. When he was utterly helpless, the king ordered them to take him to the fire, still breathing, and to fry him in a pan, because they refused to forsake the law of Moses. The smoke from the pan spread widely, but the brothers and their mother encouraged one another to die nobly, saying, "Yahweh Elohim is watching over us, and in truth has compassion on us, as Moses declared in his song that bore witness against the people to their faces when he said, 'And he will have compassion on his servants.'" After the first brother had died in this way, they brought forward the second for their sport. They tore off his skin of his head with his hair and asked him, "Will you eat rather than have your body punished limb by limb?" He replied in the language of his ancestors and said to them, "No." Therefore he in turn underwent tortures as the first brother had done, and when he was at his last breath, he said, "You accursed wretch, you dismiss us from the present life, but the King of the universe, Jesus the Messiah, will raise us up to a renewal of everlasting life, because we have died for his laws." The law of Moses and the Gospels. These are 2 things worthy of martyrdom. After him, the third was the victim of their sport. When it was demanded, he quickly put out his tongue and courageously stretched forth his hands and said nobly, "I got these from heaven, and because of his laws I disdained them, and from him I hope to get them back again." As a result, the king himself and those with him were astonished at the young man's spirit, for he regarded his sufferings as nothing. After he too had died, they maltreated and tortured the fourth in the same way. When he was near death, he said, "One cannot but choose to die at the hands of mortals, and to cherish the hope God gives of being raised again by him. But for you there will be no resurrection to life." Next they brought forward the fifth and maltreated him, but he looked at the king and said, "Because you have authority among mortals, though you are also mortal, you do what you please. But do not think that God has forsaken our people. Keep on and see how his mighty power will torture you and your descendants." After him they brought forward the sixth, and when he was about to die, he said, "Do not deceive yourselves in vain. For we are suffering these things on our own account because of our sins against our own God. But do not think that you will go unpunished for having tried to fight against God." The mother was especially admirable and worthy of honorable memory. Although she saw her 7 sons perish within a single day, she bore it with good courage because of her hope in the Lord. She encouraged each of them in the language of their ancestors. Filled with a noble spirit, she reinforced her woman's reasoning with a man's courage and said to them, "I do not know how you came into being in my womb, It was not I who gave you life and breath, nor I who set in order the elements within each of you. Therefore, the Creator of the world, who shaped the beginning of humankind and devised the origin of all things, in His mercy gives life and breath back to you again, since you now forget yourselves for the sake of His laws. Antiochus felt that he was being treated with contempt, and he was suspicious of her reproachful tone. The youngest brother being still alive, Antiochus not only appealed to him in words, but promised with oaths that he would make him rich and enviable if he would turn from the ways of his ancestors, and that he would take him for his friend and entrust him with public affairs. Since the young man would not listen to him at all, the king called the mother to him and urged her to advise the youth to save himself. After much urging on his part, she undertook to persuade her son, but leaning close to him, she spoke in their native language as follows, deriding the cruel tyrant. My son, have pity on me. I carried you 9 months in my womb and nursed you for 3 years, and have reared you and brought you up to this point in your life and have taken care of you. I beg you, my child, to look at the heaven and the earth and see everything that is in them and recognize that God did not make them out of things that existed. And in the same way the human race came into being, do not fear this butcher, but prove worthy of your brothers, accept death so that in God's mercy I may get you back again along with your brothers. While she was still speaking, the young man said, What are you waiting for? I will not obey the king's command, but I obey the command of the law that was given to our ancestors through Moses. But you who have contrived all sorts of evil against the Hebrews will certainly not escape the hands of God. For we are suffering because of our own sins, and if our living Yahweh is angry for a little while to rebuke and discipline us, he will again be reconciled with his own servants. But you unholy wretch, you most defiled of all mortals, do not be elated in vain and puffed up by certain hopes when you raise your hand against the children of heaven. You have not yet escaped the judgment of the Almighty, all-seeing God. For our brothers, after enduring a brief suffering for everlasting life, have fallen under God's covenant. But you, by the judgment of God, will receive just punishment for your arrogance. I, like my brothers, give up my body and life for the laws of our ancestors, appealing to God to show mercy soon to our nation, by trials and plagues to make you confess that He alone is God, and through me and my brothers to bring to an end the wrath of the Almighty that has justly fallen on our whole nation. The king fell into a rage and handled him worse than the others, being exasperated at his scorn, so he died in his integrity, putting his whole trust in the Lord. Last of all, the mother died after her sons. Let this be enough, then, about the eating of sacrifices and the extreme tortures. Let this be enough indeed. These people were willing to die, horribly butchered martyrs for the law of Moses, and we must be willing to do the same for the law and for the Gospels, and Jesus will redeem us in the afterlife. These Macedonians are children of Satan. These Amalekites, these are children of Satan. So remember, Alexander the Great, the Macedonian from Kittim. Kittim is Cyprus. It was conquered by the Hittites. The Hittites married into Esau's lineage, or Esau married into the Hittite lineage, and this is where the Amalekites come from. So we can trace a line from Alexander the Great and King Antiochus doing this to Israel. We can trace back a lineage from this chapter, Antiochus Epiphanes, all the way back to Amalek, who has been at war, just like God said. I will put, there will be, throughout the generations, there will be conflict between your race and their race. Here, I'll read it to you right now. It should be Exodus chapter 17, I believe. Let's see. Exodus 17:14. And Yahweh said unto Moses, Write this for a memorial in a book, and rehearse it in the ears of Joshua, for I will utterly put out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. So, there was another verse about this. There's many verses about Amalek, but essentially, they've been at war with Israel ever since. They have basically sold themselves to the devil to fight against God, and this is what they did to God's people. Why did they do this to God's people? Because they refused to break the law of Moses. I understand doing this to somebody calling himself a Jew who engages in black magic, who engages in human sacrifice. I understand that. That's not a Jew, that's a Satanist pretending to be a Jew. These were noble, innocent men killed because they refused to break the law of Moses. And I hope to see them in the afterlife. Shabbat Shalom, my brothers and sisters in Christ. This is the Word of God. Now, this version of the Bible on BibleGateway.com, this is the one I recommend. The New Revised Standard Version. I can't click on that. It's NRSVUE. So the New Revised Standard Version U edition, this is the one that I recommend. It has the most books, it has the Apocrypha. The Bible we have is not complete. They removed 7 books from the Protestant Bible, and there were many more pieces of information that have been removed over the years. But this book, The Martyrdom of 7 Brothers, that last verse, 2 Maccabees chapter 7. Let this be enough then about the eating of sacrifices and the extreme tortures. Why are you eating swine? Why are you eating shrimp? These people were willing to die rather than eat pork. Do you understand that if Satan is willing to kill you for eating pork, that you shouldn't be eating pork? If Satan's willing to kill you for refusing pork because it's a transgression of the law of Moses, then you should not be eating pork. Pork is unclean flesh. That's why they fed it to the slaves. They fed they fed pig intestines to the slaves as a form of witchcraft. Yeah, chitlins. Think about that. Shalom, people. God bless.